Anthony Albanese has just begun a media conference at Parliament House in Canberra. He's just starting that media conference now.
Joined by some of my Tasmanian colleagues, Sid Sidebottom, Dick Adams and Jeff Lyons, for an announcement that has been some time incoming. In March we announced $20 million to support Tasmanian exports due to the particular issues that were there confronting the Tasmanian freight industry. This has been a particular challenge for northern Tasmania. What we did was we looked particularly at the issues through Infrastructure Australia and through negotiations with the Tasmanian government. Those negotiations with the Tasmanian government have now been finalised, and this morning I received the report from Infrastructure Australia. There will be three components to the package. The first is support for new infrastructure at the Port of Burnie. Importantly, in order to increase the capacity of that port to operate. Secondly is specific one-off assistance for Tasmanian exporters to be sorted through a memorandum of understanding between the national government and the Tasmanian government. I've had many discussions with David O'Byrne, the last of which was face-to-face discussions this week in Canberra, following meetings that we had in South Australia at the Standing Committee on Infrastructure and Transport last Thursday and Friday. In addition, Infrastructure Australia have recommended, based upon the model that's been very successful in the Hunter, the establishment of a group that would be industry-led with $1.5 million of the $20 million funding going towards this, to look at the long-term solutions for Tasmania. What we need to do is to make sure that the shipping industry is integrated with land transport issues, with the operation of intermodal transport, with integrating also and interacting with the way that the national port system has operated. Infrastructure Australia have developed a national port strategy and have worked very closely with Infrastructure Tasmania in terms of developing this plan. This is a plan that's about ensuring there's that long-term sustainability there for Tasmanian industry. We know that Tasmania must rely upon more than just its tourism industry. It must continue to be a place where things are made and things are exported from. And that's what we want to ensure occurs. Often it is best not for government to act alone, but to act in concert, hand in hand with industry. And what this will do is identify some of those long-term issues. We know we have a Nation Building Program 2 coming up later on, and to operate from 2014-15. One of the things that will be identified is looking for road and rail, land transport upgrades, as well as the ports, to see what can be included in the Tasmanian component of Nation Building Program 2. I want to thank all members from the David O'Byrne, the Tasmanian Minister, my colleagues who are here today, other Labor members and senators. I also want to acknowledge that Andrew Wilkie has played a very constructive role in the development of this plan. What we want to make sure is that this provides long-term economic assistance for Tasmania, and I'm sure that we've done that. In terms of a second thing I want to just touch on is the legislation that I've just introduced into the Federal Parliament. This is extremely significant legislation. We are undertaking the most comprehensive reform of the maritime sector in Australia's history. Today's legislation has two components to it. Firstly, a rewrite of the Navigation Act 1912. The Navigation Act 1912 is by definition 100 years old. When it was being written, the Titanic accident happened, and some of the report into the sinking of the Titanic went into the changes that were made to that Act. There are provisions in that Act that have been there for 100 years, to name just a couple that some might regard as out of date. One is that the master of a ship can be free from prosecution if they shoot someone on that ship. Still in the Act today. The second is that if someone is bringing a lunatic on board, then they have to notify the master of the ship. The third is that it is also appropriate for public officials to shoot anyone who is plundering a ship that has been wrecked on the coast. There are a range of these provisions. Hasn't been touched and properly reformed for 100 years. This significant rewrite, 3 years in the making, full consultations with government and industry, is a great example of the reform that this government is getting on with, making a difference. The second component consistent with that is the National Maritime Regulator. We're moving from 8 different systems around the country down to one, making sure that a commercial vessel that crosses the non-existent sea border between New South Wales and Queensland doesn't have to go through a re-recognition in terms of its standards in order to operate across different coasts. That the skills are recognised also of a seafarer who works in Victoria and moves to South Australia doesn't have to be re-accredited. This is basic reform so that the Australian Maritime Safety Authority will become the single national regulator. This will have a boost along with the other transport regulators moving nationally from 23 down to 3 in maritime, heavy vehicle and rail of $30 billion to the national economy over 20 years. This is good productivity reform. It's a great example of how the government is doing the hard work in the area of infrastructure and transport, but across other sectors as well. We approved this legislation at the committee, the Ministerial Council I chair, last Thursday and Friday, and I want to thank my state and territory ministerial colleagues. It's a great example of the COAG process working, of ensuring that regardless of political allegiance from the states and territories, there was great support for this legislation, and in particular great support for industry with this reform. Together with the shipping reforms, bills that are currently before the House, this is the most significant restructuring of maritime in Australia's history. Happy to take
under
some...
these changes, the captain won't have to be notified that a lunatic is on board.
That's correct, and that should be of some relief to some people.
Minister, on a separate matter...
Yeah, hang on. Can we deal with the specifics of this matter maybe, then I'm happy to... Perhaps that's the best way, so if people have got questions... You're first, don't worry.
Senator Richard Colbeck used some very strong language this morning in Senate estimates. He says he's seriously pissed off with you. Quote, I have to say,
well,
not my words but his.
I think that's unparliamentary, isn't it? You wouldn't get away with that in the reps.
But last night, apparently your officials from your department told the committee that none of that $20 million of funding had been earmarked yet for certain projects in Tasmania, and he woke up this morning to see the article about the Burnie Port. He says that your officials have misled the committee. What do you say to that?
That's nonsense. That's nonsense. This has been subject to negotiation between the national government and the Tasmanian government for months. We announced this in March. In March, we announced the figure, $20 million. There's nothing new about the figure. What we've been doing is working through the process. We now have the framework. It's out there. The framework will now be built on in terms of going forward, those long-term solutions in terms of freight. There are a range of recommendations in the report that's been provided by the Infrastructure Coordinator. It includes, for example, having an ACCC inquiry, having a look at what the details are in terms of that inquiry. What amazes me, frankly, of your reported comments that I've heard for the first time now is that, what's his name?
Senator Colbeck.
Senator Colbeck, who I assume is a Tasmanian senator,
Liberal senator, yeah.
and he's a Liberal, there you go. He's obviously very high profile, Senator Colbeck, is that any Tasmanian senator could say this is bad news for Tasmania. This is typical of the coalition's approach. you know, you get an announcement, $20 million, support for exporters, support for infrastructure at Burnie Port, support for longer-term solutions, worked through with the infrastructure coordinator, a process that's involved industry, a process that will involve proper investigation to ensure that taxpayers' funds, every cent of it, goes to the right cause through a review from the ACCC. And what does Senator Colbeck say? No, no, no. I mean, isn't it about time that there must be someone in the coalition somewhere? I know what the reps people are like. I thought there might be a senator somewhere who might actually come out and say, this is good news for Tasmania.
He's not saying it's bad news, he's saying
Oh,
officials have misled the committee.
Well, that's nonsense. Well, that's nonsense. Well, the announcement is today, and it's an announcement by me as the Minister.
Minister, the Privileges Committee investigating Craig Thompson is...
Can we just deal with this question, because I'm sure this isn't a question to my Tasmanian colleagues, so while they're here. So, any other questions on those matters? No, no way.
Thank you,
guys.
Minister. It's excellent. Thanks very much.
I actually did have a question for Mr Lyons. Hope they report that.
No way. See you later.
Colbeck run against me once,
Mr Lyons.
and then he ran into the, he then ran into the Senate.
Well,
Well, do you want to?
I wanted to ask Jeff Lyons a question as well.
Oh, doesn't matter.
All right, Minister, the Privileges Committee investigating Craig Thompson is now investigating...
Sorry, can we
itself.
deal with the Tasmanian thing first?
Yeah, no, I think we have.
You right?
Yeah, I'm right, mate.
No worries. Sorry. Where we go?
Okay. The committee investigating Craig Thompson is now investigating itself following an alleged leak last night after the committee met. What I want to know is, what does this mean for the investigation of Mr Thompson? Could it see it delayed? Could it see it scrapped or cancelled? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are pretty simple, which is that there is no institution that the coalition aren't prepared to trash. We had yesterday Tony Abbott in a doorstop suggest to the Privileges Committee how it should conduct its affairs. I was asked a number of times, and my answer to your question today is the same as my answer to questions yesterday. It is up to the Privileges Committee how it conducts itself. And it can do so in a competent way without interference. And I was, frankly, if you look at the comments this morning from the chair of the committee, Ms Darth, and Patrick Secker, the Deputy Chair, both of them responded, I think, entirely appropriately to the fact that there was a leak. I got a phone call from a journalist last night, and I said I wouldn't have a clue what happened on the committee, nor would it be appropriate for me to know what happened on the committee. This is a serious body. And, you know, some of you around this building haven't been here for very long, and it's pretty obvious. I got asked last night by a couple of journalists, so why isn't this all being broadcast? Like, this isn't a game. This is not a joke. You either take this seriously or you don't. And this is a serious process. It should be taken seriously. And the sort of idea of trying to turn all processes into media events and just about keeping the pressure on, really, I think the coalition need to have a good look at the way that they are operating. They need to stop trying to intimidate members, intimidate committees about the way that they should operate. There are very serious breaches potentially in terms of attempting to tell a Member of Parliament. There are very clear provisions there about attempting to tell a Member of Parliament that they should resign, or they should do this, or they should do that. Very clear, not just in parliamentary standing orders, in the Crimes Act. And I'm very concerned about some of the language and the obsession about this. I mean, I've just done a press conference about some serious issues confronting Tasmania and serious issues with regard to legislation in the Parliament. I think it's about time we got back to debating the budget and debating issues. Let the legal processes, parliamentary processes, go on without interference.
You spoke about how this leak was another... Can you say without qualification that members of the committee haven't briefed any members of the government
today on what happened last night?
Oh, certainly. I certainly have not been briefed, nor have I sought a briefing on it.
You spoke about the fact that you were convinced this is the coalition trashing process, so you're certain it was a coalition
No,
that leaked it?
no, the coalition trashed the process before the committee had even met.
But in terms of the leak,
Had even met. Had even met. Well,
was responsible for the leak.
I don't know. I don't know, obviously, who was responsible. They'll have the process. But, you know, you look at the way that the exercise has been run. I mean, George Brandis, you know, Brandis on Brandis. This is a guy who's the alternative first officer of the land. I saw his interview on Late Line last night, where he was attempting to suggest the way that the committee should operate. I find that extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary.
Do you think given that there's been a leak after its first meeting, that whatever the Privileges Committee decides will have no credibility?
Well, I think that a number of people on the Privileges Committee from both sides, the public comments I've seen from Ms Darth, from Mr Secker and from Mr Randall, you know, not my greatest fan probably, Don Randall. So let me take the opportunity to say something nice about Mr Randall. His comments showed, in my view, very clearly that he was taking his responsibility seriously. It's about time, instead of lecturing every other member of Parliament about the way that they should act, how about we all just take responsibility for ourselves and act appropriately?
there's been a change in the makeup.
About whether this could delay or
I don't know.
derail the
I don't know. That's a matter for the Privileges Committee,
been-
and it's not up to me. It's not up to me to direct or attempt to direct it, nor is it up to George Brandis or Tony Abbott, with due respect. You know, that's the issue here, is that no matter what occurs, you know, the coalition wanted Mr Thompson to make a statement. Now, Mr Thompson made a comprehensive statement, was an hour long. That is what they asked to happen, but that didn't satisfy them. They then said they wanted the Privileges Committee to look at this, and are you going to block the Privileges Committee looking at this? I made it very clear that there'd be no blocking. Indeed, we went out of our way to facilitate it, just so they couldn't say, you know, government's blocking the same old tactic, you know. So leave was granted for it to be referred to the Privileges Committee, even though there has never been a finding for very good reason, if you look at House of Representatives practice, against someone for deliberately misleading the House in this fashion. So they then, after they have that process, they do change the makeup of the committee at the last minute, so express no confidence in one of the members of the committee and do that manoeuvre. They then go out and spend yesterday afternoon and last night attempting to direct the activities of the committee. We know that for a fact because we saw that, and we know that someone leaked what occurred at the committee, you know, pretty early, because I got a phone call when New South Wales was still ahead last night. So that was went downhill from there.
Do you think the change in the makeup of that personnel, any link between that and the leak?
I make no comment, except to say that I find it pretty extraordinary that you have the Committee of Privileges of the Parliament and you have a change after an inquiry is made. I can't recall actions such as that occurring in the past.
What do you make of the current affair paying $60,000 to a prostitute?
Well, I don't know whether they have or not. So I make no comments on things of which I have no knowledge.
Doesn't always the problems with the Privileges Committee, you know, supposedly the committee of the highest integrity of the Parliament, day one, first meeting, first minute, there's a leak. Doesn't that play into the belief of some of the crossbenchers and Harry Jenkins and others that politicians really shouldn't be investigating politicians, and there should be an external independent integrity commissioner or commission against corruption set up to deal with exactly these issues?
Look, what it I think plays into is some of the concerns in terms of the politicisation of processes that haven't been political. in the past. I note that those suggested reforms, and they've been around for a while, are ones which wouldn't see the replacement of a Privileges Committee. The Privileges Committee operates in just about most parliaments. It's part of Westminster tradition, and historically it has operated extremely well. The committee system in this place operates by and large in a bipartisan fashion, in a way in which I participated in the committees for a long time. There was only one leak from a committee I was a member of over more than a decade. This is a pretty serious issue to leak the first meeting of the Privileges Committee. You know, whoever is responsible has done a great disservice to themselves. More importantly, a great disservice to the Parliament. It's a great honour to be in Parliament. It's a bigger honour in terms of a particular honour, perhaps is a better word, to be a member of the Privileges Committee.
Okay, unfortunately we've got to leave that there. There was a Transport and Infrastructure Minister, Anthony Albanese, outlining $20 million in support for the Tasmanian export industries. He also went into a bit of detail about updating the Maritime Act, which was drawn up back in the Titanic days. He was also asked about some controversy about the Privileges Committee hearing last night into the Craig Thomson statement. It was supposed to be secret, but there appears to have been a leak.